Imagine for a second that you're taking a walk through a peaceful, everyday city park.
Just a normal afternoon.
Right, just a normal walk. It's the middle of winter, so, the air is biting, the ground is hard, and the trees are completely bare.
Yeah, you're just strolling along, maybe holding a cup of coffee.
Exactly. And you look up at the tree line,
Hmm.
and you notice something really strange.
Mm-hmm.
The tops of some of the older trees, right there in this quiet suburban park, are permanently scarred. They have these distinct dark burn marks right on their uppermost branches.
And you probably wonder, what in the world happened here?
You really would. And it's exactly that kind of physical scar on the landscape that brings us to our focus today.
It is. We are taking a deep dive into the source material surrounding the Amigo Memorial. We're starting with its Wikipedia article and branching out into the wider historical record.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore the intersection of a tragic historical event and I guess you'd call it the enduring, almost stubborn power of community memory.
That's a great way to put it. We're going to unpack not just what happened on one fateful afternoon in 1944, but how ordinary people spanning multiple generations have kept that memory alive right up to the present day.
And by the time we finish this discussion, I promise it will completely change how you look at the local monuments, the bronze plaques, and the parks in your own neighborhood.
Oh, absolutely. You might walk past them every single day, but this story reveals the invisible layers of history right under our feet.
So let's just unpack this. We have to go back to February 22nd, 1944.
Right.
Endcliffe Park in Sheffield, England. It's around 5:00 in the evening. The weather is grim, low clouds, incredibly poor visibility.
Classic winter in England.
Yeah, exactly. And suddenly, dropping out of that overcast sky is a heavily damaged United States Army Air Force's B-17 Flying Fortress.
To really understand the peril of that exact moment, you have to picture what daylight bombing raids in 1944 actually entailed.
They were brutal.
They really were. The aircraft was named Mi Amigo. It belonged to the 364th Bomber Squadron, based out of Shelveston in Northamptonshire.
And they were returning from a pretty punishing bombing run over Aalborg, Denmark, right?
Yes. And during that mission, doing a daylight run meant they were highly visible to enemy fighter aircraft. The Mi Amigo engaged with those fighters and sustained some critical damage.
So by the time they limped all the way back across the North Sea and reached the airspace over Sheffield Butte,
Their engines were faltering, they were losing altitude fast, and they emerged from those low clouds directly over a populated area.
and they crashed right there in Endcliffe Park.
Yeah.
The human toll was absolute. The entire crew perished that afternoon.
It's devastating.
It is. And because this deep dive is fundamentally about memory, it feels only right that we take our time today to actually read the names and the roles of the 10 men who are on board the Mi Amigo.
I agree completely. It wasn't just a machine. It was a tightly knit team where every single person relied on the others for survival.
Exactly. So let's start with the command.
Right. The pilot was First Lieutenant John Kriegshauser.
And next to him was his co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Lyle J. Curtis.
The responsibility on their shoulders in those final moments would have been immense, trying to maneuver a massive, failing bomber away from the surrounding houses.
And the kids playing in the park below.
Yeah, exactly.
Navigating the B-17 was Second Lieutenant John W. Humphrey.
And the bombardier was Second Lieutenant Melchor Hernandez.
Then you have the enlisted crew, the men who basically kept the plane flying, communicating, and defended it from enemy fire in an unpressurized, freezing cabin.
Right. The flight engineer and top turret gunner was Staff Sergeant Harry W. Estabrooks.
The radio operator, who also served as the log keeper and photographer, was Staff Sergeant Robert E. Mayfield.
And down in the belly of the plane, the ball turret gunner was Sergeant Charles H. Tuttle.
If you aren't familiar with a World War II ball turret, it was essentially a tiny glass sphere suspended underneath the fuselage of the bomber.
It's terrifying to even think about.
It really is. The gunner would sit curled up in that glass bubble for hours, entirely exposed, just defending the underside of the aircraft.
Defending the sides of the fortress were the two waist gunners, Technical Sergeant George M. Williams and Sergeant Vito R. Ambrosio.
And finally, situated at the very back of the aircraft, the tail gunner was Sergeant Maurice D. Robbins.
10 young men, an entire crew operating in extreme conditions, lost in a single moment.
It's incredibly sobering when you visualize those specific roles. And it's really important to note that pilot John Kriegshauser actually received a posthumous Distinguished Flying Cross.
You did,
The
yes.
historical consensus is that in those final seconds, he deliberately steered the doomed aircraft away from the nearby homes and the people in Encliffe Park.
Sacrificing their minimal chances of a safe crash landing just to save the civilians on the ground.
Exactly. And that crash fundamentally altered the physical environment of Encliffe Park.
Oh, without a doubt, the impact of a B-17 Flying Fortress, which is a massive piece of machinery weighing tens of thousands of pounds, is devastating.
Yeah, 12 mature trees had to be cut down as a direct result of the wreckage and the subsequent fire.
And that brings us back to the burn marks you can still see in the winter.
Right. If you stand on nearby Rustlings Road or Ecclesall Road today and look toward the hillside behind the park's cafe, you can still see a distinct, unnatural dip in the tree line.
Right where those 12 trees used to stand.
Yes, and the trees that did survive the inferno still bear those dark burn marks on their highest crowns.
It's a literal physical scar on the landscape, a testament to February 22nd, 1944, just hiding right in plain sight.
So you have this horrific event, this massive scar on a local park in England, and 10 American families thousands of miles away who have lost their sons, brothers, and husbands.
But grief doesn't stay raw forever.
No, it doesn't. Eventually, a community has to figure out how to weave a tragedy into its everyday landscape. And that brings us forward 25 years.
To November 30th, 1969.
Right. This is when the official memorial is dedicated.
It's a fascinating transition from the immediacy of wartime tragedy to formalized remembrance. On that day in 1969, the city planted a grove of 10 scarlet oak trees.
Quercus coccinea for the botany fans out there.
Yes. These were planted explicitly to replace the 12 trees that were destroyed in the crash, but they specifically planted 10 to represent the 10 crew members.
I love that detail.
And the choice of scarlet oaks is also quite poignant. They're known for turning a brilliant deep red in the autumn, serving as a very visible, living memorial that cycles with the seasons.
A living memorial. That's such a great concept. And along with the trees, they unveiled a large boulder with 2 bronze plaques attached to it.
The inscriptions on those plaques tell us a lot about how the community chose to frame this event. The upper plaque was erected by the Sheffield Royal Air Forces Association. It states simply that it is in memory of the 10 crew of the USAF bomber which crashed in the park. But it also includes the famous Latin motto of the Royal Air Force.
Per ardua ad astra.
Exactly.
Through adversity to the stars. That carries so much weight when you think about what those men went through.
It really does. But then, on the lower plaque, which lists the names and roles of all 10 crew members we just read, there's this remarkably human detail.
Oh, this part always gets me. The pilot, Lieutenant Kriegshauser, his name is actually misspelled on the bronze plaque.
Yeah. When we think about monuments, we often think of perfection, right?
Hey.
Something carved in stone by an infallible authority.
Right.
But that small spelling error serves as a reminder that this memorial was put together by ordinary, fallible people trying their absolute best to honor 10 young men from another country whom they had never even met.
That's a really beautiful way to look at it. And the dedication ceremony itself in 1969 really reflected that cross-cultural bond.
Definitely.
You had the Lord Mayor of Sheffield, Alderman Daniel O'Neill, and the Bishop of Sheffield, John Taylor, standing side by side with Major General John Bell.
Who was the commander of the 3rd U.S. Air Force in Britain at the time.
Right. It symbolized a bond that was forged in the desperation of war, but deliberately maintained in peacetime.
But here's the thing. The monument is built. The dignitaries go home, but monuments only survive if people actively care for them.
Yeah, left alone, bronze tarnishes, stone gathers moss, and paths just become overgrown.
Exactly. For decades after that 1969 dedication, the Mi Amigo Memorial was cared for through a patchwork of community stewardship.
Local military cadets would come out to clear the brush, the Sheffield Parks Department did their part, and a community group called the Friends of Porter Valley kept an eye on it.
It wasn't one central, heavily funded authority dictating the upkeep. It was simply the neighborhood refusing to let the site fade away.
Which brings us to 2018, and a local resident named Tony Foltz.
This is one of the most compelling parts of the source material.
It really is. Tony simply takes over the day-to-day maintenance of the memorial. He's not officially ordered to do it by the city council. He just takes it upon himself.
You can just picture him out there sweeping the path, clearing away the wet autumn leaves, and watering the flowers in the memorial garden.
And those flowers aren't funded by a government grant either.
No, they are regularly donated by local garden centers and well-wishers who see what Tony is doing and just want to contribute.
It's a singular, quiet devotion.
When a citizen takes on the burden of memory like that, it transforms a cold piece of stone and bronze into a truly active site of remembrance. Every time Tony sweeps those steps, he is reinforcing that unspoken promise the community made.
It is the ultimate grassroots effort, but then this quiet, everyday routine in a Sheffield park absolutely explodes onto the global stage.
It does. The turning point comes in January 2019. Dan Walker, a presenter for BBC Breakfast, happens to be walking his dog in Endcliffe Park and strikes up a conversation with Tony Folds.
And during their chat, Tony shares a dream he has held on to for a long time. He wants a commemorative fly past over the memorial for the upcoming 75th anniversary of the crash.
Dan Walker uses his considerable platform, and suddenly Tony's quiet local dream becomes a massive viral mission.
Which leads us to February 22nd, 2019, exactly 75 years to the day after the Mi Amigo fell from the sky.
The response from both the United States and the United Kingdom militaries was staggering.
It was a meticulously coordinated international operation. At exactly 8:45 in the morning, 10 aircraft flew over Endcliffe Park.
To really appreciate the scale of this tribute, we should detail the aircraft involved, because it spanned generations of aviation history.
Let's do it.
Leading the way was a historic aircraft, a Dakota from the RAF's Battle of Britain Memorial Flight flying out of RAF Coningsby.
That would have been the slow, rumbling propeller sound echoing the era of the B-17 itself.
Right. Following the Dakota were two aircraft from the United States Air Force's 352nd Special Operations Wing based at RAF Mildenhall.
An MC-130J Commando II and a CV-22 Osprey.
And the Osprey uses that incredible tilt-rotor technology to fly like an airplane but hover like a helicopter.
Then came the heavy metal, a KC-135 Stratotanker from the USAS 100th Air Refueling Wing, also out of Mildenhall.
If you aren't familiar with a Stratotanker, it's essentially a massive flying gas station used to refuel other jets in midair.
Seeing an aircraft of that sheer size flying low over a suburban park provides such a stark contrast to the World War II era planes that preceded it.
Definitely. Representing the modern Royal Air Force were two Typhoon fighter jets from 41 Squadron.
If you've ever heard a modern fighter jet fly over your house, you know it literally shakes your bones with the noise.
Oh, yeah. And finally, the incredible culmination of the Flypast 4 F-15E Strike Eagles from the USAF 48th Fighter Wing based at RAF Lakenheath.
And the F-15s performed a traditional missing man formation.
For those who might not know, a missing man formation is an aerial salute where a group of aircraft fly in a V-shape.
Right, and as they approach the memorial site, one jet abruptly pulls away from the group and climbs steeply into the sky,
leaving a visible void in the formation to symbolize the fallen.
And in an incredibly touching detail, the names of all 10 of the Mi Amigo crew members were actually painted onto the sides of those F-15 fighter jets.
Imagine standing in the park where the B-17 crashed, feeling the deafening roar of those engines, and knowing that 75 years later, the names of those 10 young men are flying overhead on supersonic jets.
Gives you chills. And the tribute didn't end over Sheffield either.
No. After clearing the park, the F-15s continued their flight path southward to perform a second flight past at the American Cemetery and Memorial in Cambridge.
3 of the Mi Amigo crew are permanently buried there, while the other 7 were ultimately repatriated to the United States after the war.
It was a massive viral moment that morning.
Think about the contrast. From Tony sweeping the path alone in the quiet mist, to thousands of members of the public packed shoulder to shoulder in the park, looking up at the sky.
BBC Breakfast was broadcasting live to the nation. They even had family members of Lieutenant Kriegshauser and Lieutenant Hernandez as featured guests on the broadcast.
All over Twitter, hashtags like #RememberThe10, #MyAmigo75th, and #SheffieldFlyPast were trending worldwide.
It proves that a highly localized story, when it touches on universal themes of sacrifice, youth, and gratitude, can resonate globally.
Absolutely. But the story of the Mi Amigo Memorial doesn't freeze in that viral moment in 2019. The physical reality of the memorial site requires continuous, practical evolution.
Because an event trending on social media is wonderful for awareness, but a hashtag doesn't stop the winter rain from eroding the soil around the bronze plaques.
Exactly. So fast forward to the summer of 2023. The Sheffield branch of the Royal Air Forces Association, or RAFA, recognized that the site needed serious structural work.
They launched an appeal for funds to refurbish the memorial, setting up a GoFundMe page. And within just a few months, the local community and well-wishers quickly raised their target of over 16,000 pounds.
That is a significant amount of money for a local community to crowdsource for a single neighborhood memorial.
It really is.
So what did they actually do with those funds?
Between December 2023 and January 2024, RFA worked directly with the Sheffield City Council to physically update the site. They removed the heavy, aging and rotting timber posts and fences, replacing them with lightweight painted steel posts and durable handrails.
They reordered the uneven sloping steps that had become a trip hazard over the decades too, right?
Yes, and they provided new handrails specifically to fix the disabled access. They also added an additional modernized display board to tell the story of the crew and a dedicated weatherproof box for family, friends, and visitors to leave memorabilia.
The push for accessibility there is so vital. Upgrading the steps and installing steel handrails isn't just a basic construction project. It's a way of ensuring the memorial remains open to the people who most want to visit.
Exactly. Surviving relatives, aging veterans, and the older community members who remember the dedication in 1969 need to be able to safely navigate the terrain.
Physical memorials must adapt to remain accessible to all generations, not just the physically agile.
And they managed to finish all of those upgrades just in time for the 80th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on February 22nd, 2024, at exactly 11 Mio in the morning, two F-15E Strike Eagles from RAF Lakenheath returned to perform another commemorative flypast over the newly refurbished memorial.
It is a remarkable chain of custody. From the local men and women who rushed toward the burning wreckage in 1944, to the city officials planting oaks in 1969, to the military cadets, to Tony Foods quietly sweeping the steps, to the thousands of people who donated to a GoFundMe in 2023.
The dedication simply refuses to fade.
For you listening to this, I think the real takeaway here isn't just the mechanics of a World War II plane crash or the logistics of a military flypast.
No, it's bigger than that.
It's a profound testament to how an ordinary community in Sheffield looked at 10 American airmen who fell from the sky into their park and essentially adopted them as their own sons.
They made a collective, unspoken promise that those 10 men would never be forgotten.
And through sweeping leaves, planting Scarlet Oaks, raising thousands of pounds, and organizing international flypasts, they have actively kept that promise for 80 years.
Which raises an important question and a final thought I really want to leave with you today. As time marches on, the generation with any direct, lived connection to the events of World War II is entirely fading away.
Yeah, we are losing them fast.
We see from the Mi Amigo story that physical sites require constant, expensive, and physical upkeep. Whether it's an individual manually sweeping the paths every morning or a community having to raise 16,000 pounds just to install steel handrails so people can safely visit.
Right.
What happens to our thousands of physical monuments across the globe in another 80 years? Will the ease of digital memory, Wikipedia pages, and trending hashtags eventually replace the deep human need for bronze plaques and Scarlet Oaks?
Or is there something irreplaceable about standing in a freezing park, touching a cold stone, and looking up at a physical scar on a tree that forces us to remember in a way a screen never could?
That is the question we are going to have to answer.
It truly will define how the future chooses to remember the past. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the incredible history and legacy of the Mi Amigo Memorial. Keep looking up at the trees, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.